Yeah, bring back the Limp Biscuit.
They did have
That's
their
a
day.
throwback.
God, wasn't it? So wait a minute.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Give everybody a couple seconds to join in.
Hi, everybody.
What's up, y'all?
We got
Michael will
four
give you,
squares on
and
the screen.
Michael will give $100 to anybody that can guess what condiment. What's your daughter's name, Jessica? What's her name?
Sophie.
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 What condiment she has on her thumb that she's seasoned her thumb with? She's teething.
I'm gonna go with
Yep.
mustard.
Mustard.
You're gonna go with mustard?
See, but Heather's a chef, so she's gonna do something bougie. So what's
I'm thinking
the?
I'm thinking honey.
Honey. Ooh.
Okay.
Like the clover honey, or?
Like organic honey.
Oh, wow.
Well, she
flour
just
did
had
it
some
come from,
buffalo chicken sliders from Arby's. So I think
Oh, okay. It's horsey sauce.
You know.
Like, no? Okay.
Okay, goodbye.
That's your
One of the
doctoral.
reasons I go to Arby's.
I go for the cookies.
Oh, okay. All
They have
right.
cookies.
Get it all for the cookies.
Oh yeah, their cookies are good.
Oh, there you go.
All
I
the
caught that,
folks
Michael.
coming in the room are like, "What in the world did I join? What is happening? What is this conversation about? I thought it was about
It's
Fresh
about-
Expressions."
But it's about apparently Limp Biscuit and mustard and honey. So.
Yeah,
And Arby's sauce.
the Limp Biscuit reference.
Yes.
Okay, we can go ahead and jump right in. You want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's first? Heather goes first.
Hey, everybody. I'm Heather Jallad. I am a cultivator of Fresh Expressions here in the North Georgia Conference of the Methodist Church.
I'll go next. I'm Sam Hubbard, and I'm with Louisiana, and I'm a cultivator over in that conference for the UMC.
I'm Jessica Taylor, and I'm in Florida, where it's very hot right now.
Always.
Also cultivating Fresh Expressions there. Yeah.
That's right. And I'm Michael Beck. I'm in Florida as well, and I have like 7 jobs, all part-time, full-time jobs for part-time pay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, is there any
We
way
have
to
no
do it?
idea what that's about. Yeah.
Yeah.
No idea. And we're here to talk about Fresh Expressions, specifically Fresh Expressions UM, and the webinars that have been running once a month, the monthly webinars that have been running, free webinars. If you missed last month, we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what's coming up 2 weeks from today on our next free webinar. This is a part of Path 1 and Discipleship Ministries for the Methodist Church. So Michael, why don't you say just a word about FXUM, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about our last webinar.
Sure. So Fresh Expressions UM is a Holy Spirit, a movement of the Holy Spirit. Thank you, Blossom Matthews, for making sure that we got that in there. Of a distinct Wesleyan movement of Fresh Expressions. And so what we're doing is bringing forth treasures old and new, and looking at kind of like early Methodism, some of those missional values that were clearly part of early Methodism, which exist at some level, hopefully, in the United Methodist Church today, but then synergizing those with the Fresh Expressions movement, and really kind of owning a grace-centered, compassionate, and incarnational way of creating new Christian communities. That's what Fresh Expressions UM is all about.
Yeah, and so with these webinars, Jessica enlightened me last time, because if I wasn't paying attention, I apparently wasn't paying attention. But we've kind of been moving through the journey of starting a Fresh Expression and the different webinars that have been hosted over the last several months. And last month, we had an amazing, remarkable guest that shared with us from our future from the UK, and there were so many truth bombs. And I just appreciated so much of what Andrew Vertigan had to share with us. I don't know, Sam, like what like really resonated with you when you heard him speak last month?
Well, good gosh, made so many notes. Like, so I don't want to like take everybody's notes, but like, I think the one thing that he said it right at the beginning, it was really, I think people like, that are, I don't know, people that just like to get after it and all that kind of stuff. And we were just talking about it, like how we all just burn ourselves out, trying to do stuff. And right out the gate, he was just like, "Oh, hey, by the way, things are bad, and all that stuff, but God can do this without you, right?" And it's like, "Ooh, you sure?" It's like, I mean, well, maybe he can do it without Heather, but I'm not me, But you know what I'm saying? It just was like, it's really helpful to, I mean, something as simple as that, because I think sometimes we try to figure out all these strategies and all that, and it's like, hey, this isn't like. This is important what's going on, but also this is not a job, it's an invitation. And God could do this without you, but God doesn't want to. And it's not something that you got to suffer through. In fact, you should have joy through it. And so that's just something that really, the very first thing, I have about 7 things that stuck out, so I won't say them all. But well, hello. But that's the first thing that stuck out to me. What about you, Jessica, Heather, Mike? What do you think?
It was just so good. Like last month's they've all been really good. I've just really liked them all. But gosh, if you haven't seen it yet, you have to watch it. You have to get in there and watch it. It's up on our Facebook group, and you got to get in there and watch it before we go into next month.
I think I think you mislabeled it, because it wasn't a webinar. It was a straight up sermon. Like, he preached straight up. So
oh yeah,
it's not your typical webinar.
So definitely let's post a link to that Facebook book group so more people can find it. And also obviously that we'll have a link posted to the upcoming webinar, so you can register for that, even if you aren't able to appear or join in real time. If you register, you'll get the video of it, the recording of it afterwards, so you can watch that. It's a great way also to kind of share what Fresh Expressions is all about with people in your local context, or in your conference, or in your district, or wherever, so you can really kind of spark some conversations about what's possible. And this is obviously, it's free, so it's available to everybody. Sit down and watch it together and have a conversation. I know one of the things that really stood out to me that I felt like was driven home over and over and over again was just how essential partnerships and connectedness are in starting Fresh Expressions, about how really momentum is gained in collaboration, not only one to another in building great teams, but Sam, you and I have talked about this a lot in regards to people that are shaped in this way, that have those kind of apostolic evangelistic gifts that that they really spur one another on so much when they're together. And I think that connectedness is so important with people that are looking to start Fresh Expressions of church. I think the other thing that that really kind of resonated with me is the whole idea of the demise of heroic leaders, which I know our friend George Acevedo would love to tell us all about. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of how we've been operating for so long. And again, it just points back to the significance of connection and collaboration and team, and what's been called decentralized leadership, and the whole body of Christ being deployed, the priesthood of believers and all their gifts. And I feel like that was driven home to some extent as well. He was so generous because he gave us like all of his notes and his slides and everything. So you can not only listen to what he had to share, but you can also share his slides as well.
He also shared his email address, which was like, he was like, if you liked it or you didn't like it, shoot me an email. Let's talk about it. If you hated it, let's talk about it. So I thought
Yeah.
that was really cool too.
Good stuff.
For sure.
Well, I know. Believe it or not, I'm tying something in here with him being generous. Is like that was the other thing that really. This was probably the second biggest thing that really stuck out is that he was talking about the work that we got to do because he's from the future, and the work that we got to do is that it's not going to be like you do these 4 steps and in 3 years everything is going to be all right. This is the generational thing that's going to have to happen. And I love when he said, and I can't, was it in whose book was it? It was in somebody's book, but it was like it was in your book, Michael. That's what
It was one of Mike's 8 books or whatever.
yeah. But it was like the old men plant trees that they'll never sit in the shade in. And it's like that's the other thing that really kind of reminded me of, like, first of all, God doesn't require you to do this. God invites you to do this, but it's like you're not going to see the full fruit of what you get to do. And see, that's what I was talking about. Like his just humility in that was really spoke to me as it's like, okay, this is something that's going to be in for the long haul that we have to do, and we got to be okay with that. In fact, once again, I go back to that whole idea of like we got to have joy in that, even though we'll never sit under that shade necessarily. Although I think we will, just a little bit of the shade sometimes.
I mean, that's generative leadership anyway, right? I mean, I think our current paradigms have certain people kind of hoarding power and resources to some degree, and this is about giving it all away, which the last time I checked is pretty much what Jesus did. So I think that's something that we certainly need to walk out better.
Yeah, it made me just get this sense of how really vast the Wesleyan family is. Sometimes we focus on, the UMC or this particular expression or whatever, but, Salvation Army is part of our tribe. I call them the real Methodists who didn't sell out when it came to like doing in the trenches, like ministry with people, in the pain points of the city in a context, right? And like one of the first things I do when I've gone to a new appointment is I find out who the Salvation Army officers are, and I ask them what's going on in the community, because they already know, and they're already right there on the front line doing all kind of stuff. Usually, they have the shelter or the feeding or whatever. So that just comes back to those founding principles that they haven't really lost with William and Catherine Booth, of just like, really loving and serving. We talk about Fresh Expression. Well, they've been doing that, and, Sam and I were talking about that, the way that they do church planning earlier. But the idea that, we're seeing into the future as well, like the realities of decline and all those things, the bummer alert, the bummer report, big empty cathedrals and empty church spaces and all that. But then the really exciting, like Fresh Expression and in their language, pioneer ministry stuff that's springing up. And Andrew's really been on the front edge of that all along. And to see, a wave of that kind of coming over for those who are joining in the U.S. I know we have people who could be anywhere in the world. So that's really, really exciting. And I think too much, just speaking as a United Methodist, we take our bearings from the past. And it's always about, we're trying to move back to this or whatever, or these are our core, whatever. And God's not directing us from the past. We can learn from the past. There's some things there we need to understand hindsight, right? But God's alive and present now, and he's thrown this rope of hope from the future that we grab onto, and I was just writing an article about this, but like as we kedge our way forward as a United Methodist Church, these little rowboats that take an anchor forward and like move a big ship that's kind of stuck or experiencing inclement weather. That what if these little Fresh Expressions of church, these new Christian communities, these really creative things that are happening all over the world. And it seems like all we get is headlines about schism and this and that. And so much of it's about actually going backwards, like the 1950s or something. But these little rowboats are actually moving us forward and showing us a new vision for what the church can be, and moving the anchor forward into the future. So all that he shared about like death and resurrection and new creation, we have this vision of the future. Like it's greater than any vision statement we could ever come up with. And what if we were to like look at God's revealed future, think Revelation, a city where we gather, where the healing of the nations and every tribe and race and culture gather around Jesus and all those. And what if we started like trying to do the things today that lend themselves, that flow into that future, and we took our direction and our bearings from the future rather than the past. And I don't know, there's so much out there in Methodism that's this overly legalistic and conservative like vision of, if we just went back and did this, maybe, but maybe not too. Like John Wesley, there's some places where we need to, think alike with him. And John Wesley himself said, where structures confine mission, he said, I lay them aside. Right. So the ultimate concern was like sharing the gospel and forming new Christian communities for Wesley. Like I'll take that, but not everything. Like Wesley was a man of his time, so not everything in the way that he did things and thought about things is going to actually translate to a new context and
Right.
So I was just pulling so many things from what Andrew was saying. It was amazing.
Really good stuff, and really kind of builds upon each of the webinars that we've been able to share with folks to this point. And I think also, maybe points to the possibility that really is going to be addressed in the next webinar with Tyler Kleeberger, and this whole idea of rural. It's a really hard word to say for me. Rural
country fresh expressions. Country.
And I know I get this question a lot, or I have this observation articulated to me. Like it seems like Fresh Expressions work really great in more urban or even suburban areas, but maybe not so much in rural contexts. And we know that that's not the case. Those of us who have been kind of working in the wide world of Fresh Expressions for any amount of time, there's been some really creative expressions that have begun in rural contexts. So Tyler Kleeberger will be the guest on the next webinar 2 weeks from today. And Michael, the two of you just co-authored a book together. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so actually the book comes out next week, Fresh Expressions of the Rural Church. So
good timing.
Yeah. Grab a copy of that. And just what you said, Heather, about the in many cases, like I've served rural churches my whole ministry. I've never served anything but a rural church. I'm actually in Ocala now, which is a more urban context, but it's my first actual urban context where I've served. And so all the stuff that's happened at Wildwood, and just there's so many stories across the country and the world, fresh expressions happening in rural. And a lot of times the rural feels like it's a forgotten space or a thorn in the foot of progress, or just this thing that's irrelevant or whatever. And actually, we do a little bit of kind of digging into the history of Methodism, which Francis Asbury's whole strategy was rural, right? And one of the key statements that he said was to channel resources from the circumference to the edge. And early Methodism in the United States was a rural movement. And it left behind this constellation of new Christian communities all over that basically laid the blueprint for what we know as the rural areas today. Right. And so we get into some of that, and how where more the urban centers, there was a high emphasis on like educated clergy and all of those things. Methodism was a barnstorming in the backcountry. It was field preaching. It was camp meetings. It was and there's so much there that we can learn from that and what we're doing with Fresh Expressions today in rural spaces. So Tyler has done this incredible thing where a church in Metamora, Ohio, which is in the middle of nowhere, with black mold, like dying, that desperation gave a vision to rethink what a church can be. And so they started having barn parties and meeting in a barn space, and actually built a building that's essentially a barn that has farmers markets and has a weekly time where people get together for food and to have a couple of drinks, and also doubles as a worship space and a field where crops are being planted and all that. And just gives us this really powerful vision of a place economy, which is like holistic salvation thinking, like the goodness and the shalom of a place and everybody in it. And it's like this interconnected network. And how the rural church was and probably always will be like a center of the rural community that can actually create vitality and shalom in a community. It's one of the few permanent stakeholders. Rural churches been there forever, and it's has the only place where people of different like political and all kind of differences come together in a rural church, right? There's so much power in that and so much that we can do with that. And it's almost like, if you get appointed to a rural church or something, and for those of us that are United Methodist, it's like a demotion or something, right? But what if we saw actually how God's new creation and God's blazing trails of resurrection always starts in the wilderness, in burning bushes and Galilee, and outside the conventional like urban centers, God's movement goes forth and new revelation takes place. And what if we just own that as rural congregations and people? So yeah, sorry. That was
I remember actually. No. I remember the first time I started, it was years ago, about rural Fresh Expressions, because we really have kept it kind of quiet for some reason. Maybe because the other stuff's flashier, I don't know. But I remember this, one of the first persons who was really big in that was up in West Virginia. And or what is the name of that mountains? Appalachian Mountains, that area. And he was talking about his Fresh Expression and what that looked like. And he said something. I wish I knew his name, but when he said that, my brain exploded. But he goes, we're seeing it now, because this was several years ago. It's like, we see the church dying. The first of it is in churches. They're because they have less people older, and then they tend to die first, and that's what's going on. And that's, you can't deny that. But then he goes, well, but we're followers of Jesus, and the thing with that is, if they die, then they're the same place where that died is where the same place resurrection is first starting to. We're going to first start seeing it. And I was like, what? Oh my God! And that's what I started thinking, like, oh, maybe we need to focus on the rural areas a little bit more, because we need a little bit more hope than we got right now. But I know when he said that actually blew my mind about rural churches.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times, when I've heard exactly what I shared, had it articulated to me, I get how Fresh Expressions happen in, urban or even suburban areas, but, how does that work in a rural context? And to just kind of emphasize what Michael shared, oftentimes the rural church is the gathering space for the community. Those are the places where community meetings happen, where parties happen, where that just is a comfortable, almost like a public space, almost like a third space, because it's a space where people feel they can more freely come and go. And that's a little bit different in an urban context or a suburban context. I've heard some pretty creative ideas around rural fresh expressions, and I'm curious if you guys want to share any of the ones that you're familiar with that maybe are a little different or thinking outside the box.
Just quickly, I want to acknowledge Bill Foster there, lifting up theological poetry, a great to rural churches he's now serving in retirement.
Nice.
Thank you for that, Bill. There's a
Yeah,
example right there.
that is a
Mhm.
great example.
Anybody else out there? Yeah, post it in the comments section if you're doing awesome stuff in the rural.
I know I've had conversations in regards to like setting up a swap meet in your parking lot to start to form community with folks and relationships. A lot of kind of like the muscle car subculture where they're looking to get together. Yeah. Sam's like, what? Like the muscle cars or the classic cars, and they want a place to set up and show off their stuff and have a regular opportunity to gather. I mean, those are other things that folks have shared about in the rural and in the rural context in the rural churches for Fresh Expressions, doing a monthly barbecue opportunity. So it may start as an event kind of a thing, but it certainly is an opportunity to gather a number of people that might not come into your church otherwise and begin to form relationships with them.
I know I was in a rural context, and one of the things that I didn't anticipate was how expensive the internet is out there. Like to get the internet, because you're gonna have to get like satellite or something.
Yeah.
So I've seen like what we did was have a church internet cafe basically, but like all of the teenagers that needed to do homework that were going home to places that they couldn't afford to get Wi-Fi. I mean, that's like $150 plus a month just to get Wi-Fi out there. And that was a good gathering space.
Yeah, that's awesome. Meets a real need in the community.
Yeah. Jessica, is the RV church network kind of a way to think about rural Fresh Expressions, do you think?
There's a lot of them that are in like rural places, but it's kind of mixed. She wants me to read her Bible.
Oh, we can
Nice.
do that.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Good little Methodist here. Yeah, there's just a lot of different, like there's a lot of people in a rural context that will live in or like rent out property and have RVs. Like they'll do harvest hosts and they'll do kind of gathering spaces like that. So it's a cool thing to kind of see those connect. But they're one of the things like we noticed while being up in the air is like being in Florida. When we fly over Florida, it's all houses everywhere you look. When you fly over Ohio, it's all green. So that was one thing that I was like, wow, Ohio is very different. It's green. Like there's no houses. Like it's just patches of fields. So
Lots of
I
wide
think
open
that's the
spaces.
majority. Yeah.
That's a really good point, Jessica, and I think Jacob has a question he's raising up here. That people assume like that all rural contexts are the same, right? And they're not. Like the diversity of rural spaces is like between Metamora, Ohio, or like where Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings wrote The Yearling in North Florida, where I served a little church called La Calusa in the middle of like nowhere. My first appointment. Those are two very different kinds of rural, right? And we like stereotype rural, and we think that they're all the same. Look, they're just as diverse as the ecosystems and the people where they are. So those stereotypes I think aren't really helpful about rural, and I hope we try to show in the book like a diversity of rural contexts and stories.
Yeah.
So everybody can get the book next week and then bring all the tough questions the following week to the webinar.
There you go. Yeah, because it is 2 weeks. It's
Just
two
good
weeks from today. 2 weeks from today.
I just posted the link again in the chat. And I think it's also in the description that you can click on the article and register to join. We've got like 320 people, I think, a little bit over that, registered for this month. So join in, get in this month, and let's learn about the rural church, because I think this is one that's been highly requested. Like the whole time, every month, it's like, when are we going to talk about the rural church? When are we going to talk? Like, I'm in the rural church, so this is gonna be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Jason Moore sighting in the house, y'all.
I see that. I see that. I see that. I didn't even recognize him, Jason, when I saw him recently. I'm like, who is that guy with the facial hair? He's just trying to keep up with Sam, I guess. I don't.
Yeah,
That's a long way to
this
go,
is
Michael. I want to see that.
Years.
I want to see that, Michael.
cultivated.
I spent more money on this than the oil in my truck. So you gotta buckle up for it.
Oh my gosh, questions no one's really asking right now, but anyway.
Well, on that note, I think sign up for the webinar, get registered. Any final thoughts on the rural church? And I mean, if you want to see the other ones,
I was gonna say join the 300 plus other people that are already going to be there, because the conversation is obviously happening already, and this is just a way to continue that conversation in your particular context, and learn from some guys that have actually started Fresh Expressions in rural contexts, which is who we want to hear from, right? I mean, we want to hear from people that are doing the thing. So
yeah, well, no, I'll tell my Louisiana folks, because we're primarily rural churches. We'll be focusing a lot of our time next year on rural churches, and so I highly encourage them to watch it to get a taste of where the direction we're going to be spending our time at in the conference. So
similarly in North Georgia, we have a lot of rural churches that are pastored by local pastors, the unsung heroes of our denomination in many ways, and so this is just a great opportunity for all of us to kind of rally around this. So I look forward to it. Look forward to the book coming out next week, webinar the following week. Lots of good stuff on rural churches and Fresh Expressions. So we look forward to seeing you guys in the webinar.
That's August 25th at 6:30. So we're going back to the normal time. We were back in the past.
6:30 Eastern, correct?
6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central.
So and then you do the math for the rest of the times.
Yeah. We'll give you those too.
Math is hard, yeah.
So 5:30 Central, August 25th.
Bye, everybody.
See you later.